is going on, guys? My name is Taylor Stuber, and I'm here to break down this 10-game NBA slate on Draftkings and PrizePicks.com. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you guys are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you guys haven't done so already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And while you're down there, make sure to drop a like and a comment as well. All of those things really help out the algorithm for me. That is the number one way to support me. You can do all of that within 10 seconds. You can comment anything you want. You can ask me a question. I'll try to get to as many of them as I possibly can before lock. Of course, guys, I will be live streaming at 5 p.m. Central Time, a full hour before lock, breaking down all of the latest breaking injury news, as well as answering as many questions as I can in that hour time frame. But we got a 10-game slate on tap today. If you guys want to know exactly what I'm playing on DraftKings, FanDuel, and PrizePicks every single day, make sure to join my Patreon. That is linked down below. $25 a month. I think it's a pretty damn good deal. But yeah, if you guys want to join my Discord as well, that is completely free. Also linked down below. Let's just jump right into this slate. So we will start up top with the Brooklyn Nets versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. At 207.5 over under, the Nets are currently 7.5 point favorites. The Nets are going to be without Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Nick Clarkson, and Bruce Brown. So they are going to be shorthanded today for the most part. We're used to them being without Clarkson, Joe Harris, Kyrie Irving. Paul Millsap actually returning to the team after a couple of absences due to personal reasons. Kevin Durant is also returning to the lineup after his one-game absence last time out against the Orlando Magic. I think Harden and Durant are probably a bit too expensive for me, with both of them being healthy. Javon Carter started the second half of last game when Bruce Brown was injured in the first half, played 12.5 second half minutes. Not really considering him here. I'm expecting DeAndre Bembry and Patty Mills to continue to be in the starting lineup. Bembry played over 40 minutes last game. Wasn't very good in those minutes, but he played a ton, and at $3,100, I think he's definitely in play. Patty Mills should continue to start in place of Joe Harris. They have brought his price up to $4,500. I think he's a pretty solid play here. As long as this game does stay competitive, he should be able to pay off that price tag, but really focusing in on Patty Mills and DeAndre Bembry from the Brooklyn Nets side. Move over to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Evan Mobley, Colin Sexton are out. Cedi Osman and Lamar Stevens are both doubtful. So I'm expecting those guys to end up missing. Larry Markkinen and Jarrett Allen are expected to return in this game. Both could have returned a couple of games ago, but they wanted to get them more practices under their belt to get their conditioning up. So I'm expecting them to get back into the starting lineup today and play their full complement of minutes, since they have been able to come back, but they haven't just because of conditioning issues. So I'm expecting Larry Markkinen to be one of the more popular plays on the slate at $5,000, assuming he's in the starting lineup, with no Evan Mobley and Kevin Love seemingly not going to be playing that many minutes. We should see a big opportunity for Larry Markkinen here at only $5,000. Love that price tag on him. Move over to the Charlotte Hornets versus the Washington Wizards. At 216 over under, the Wizards are currently 4.5 point favorites. PJ Washington is doubtful, so Mason Plumlee should be able to get his full complement of minutes when it comes to he's like the only traditional center that the Hornets want to play right now, but they will go small with Cody Martin and Kelly Oubre off the bench playing the 5, or Miles Bridges playing the 5. So especially against a smaller Washington Wizards team, I think that is likely to happen. Mason Plumlee probably plays anywhere from like 24 to 26 minutes. Does get it, obviously, a great front court matchup against the Washington Wizards. But I'm really not considering much from this Charlotte team outside of LaMelo Ball. After he was complaining about how many minutes he was playing, because if you remember early on in the season, he was complaining about how many minutes he was playing and getting benched in like the fourth quarter due to the backup guys. And ever since then, they have been letting his minutes absolutely rip, playing mid to high 30s minutes, up to upwards of like 39 minutes in these games. Obviously a very good matchup. So I like LaMelo Ball. I think he does deserve this 10.2K price tag. He has shown his upside time and time again. So I think people are going to be scared off this price tag. I think he's one of the better pay-up options on the slate. Now, despite the Wizards being a bit tougher on defense, contrary to like previous years, they are fourth in terms of defensive rating so far this year. Previous years, they have been like a bottom tier defense in a very fast team. This year, they're a pretty slow team and pretty good defensively. Move over to the Washington Wizards. Thomas Bryant, Davis Bertans, and Rui Hachimura are all out. Daniel Gafford was in severe foul trouble last game, but if you remember before that thumb injury a couple games ago, he was splitting the center minutes almost equally with Montrezl Harrell. They split all 48 of those center minutes unless somebody's dealing with foul trouble. We saw that last time when Denny Avdia ended up playing a ton of minutes at the 5 in the first half. But on a normal scenario like we should see today, Gafford and Montrezl should split all 48 center minutes, and I'm expecting the minutes to be relatively the same. So Daniel Gafford at $4,400 is definitely in play, not really considering Montrezl at $6,200. I think Bradley Beal is a fine play at $9,300, but there's much better plays today. In my opinion, I'm avoiding the Wizards for the most part. Move on to the Houston Rockets versus the Boston Celtics. A 212 over under. The Celtics are currently 12-point favorites, so there is some blowout risk in this game. The Rockets are going to be without John Wall, and then Kevin Porter Jr. is questionable. Kevin Porter Jr. has missed each of the last 2 games. Eric Gordon has been playing in place of him and has been playing big minutes and has been facilitating the offense. He has pretty much been a one-for-one replacement for Kevin Porter Jr., except he's way cheaper than him. Eric Gordon has averaged 10.5 potential assists through these last 2 games since he has been the starter. So if Kevin Porter Jr. is ruled out, I think guys like Jayshawn Tate, Eric Gordon, Jalen Green are entirely too cheap. Christian Wood, more of a secondary play with or without Kevin Porter Jr. And over here on Prize Picks, if you guys want to take advantage, I'm telling you the best way to take advantage of Prize Picks is just to like download everything in your brain on who's on the board. And once injury news breaks, you want to come over here and make sure to take the overs or unders on everything. So Kevin Porter Jr. is currently questionable right now. So if he were to be ruled out, we'll probably find out around shoot around. So around 12:30 p.m. Central Time. If he is ruled out, guys like Jayshawn Tate, Eric Gordon specifically, I would just slam the over. As soon as you get where Kevin Porter Jr. is out, come over here. And I think there is crazy value in Christian Wood, Jalen Green, and Jayshawn Tate as well. So, but specifically Eric Gordon, you compare him with some other guys I'm going to mention later on in this video. But yeah, if Kevin Porter Jr. is ruled out, I like those guys a ton, specifically Eric Gordon. If he is ruled in, I'm not really interested in anybody on this Houston Rockets team. Move over to the Boston Celtics. They are dealing with no injuries right now. Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown are expected to return in this game. So with Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams being out for so long, the prices of everybody have risen quite a bit. So I'm off of everybody on this entire Boston Celtics team, especially since there is blowout risk in this game. Move over to the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Atlanta Hawks, a 212.5 over under. The Hawks are currently 11-point favorites. The Thunder are healthy outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is questionable in this game. He ended up exiting the last game a bit early into the third quarter. Kenrich Williams replaced him for the most part. I'm expecting Kenrich Williams, who is a pretty flexible player, to be the starter if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander misses this game. And if Shai ends up missing this game, guys like Josh Giddey has a legitimate chance to get a triple-double in this game without Shai. In 114 minutes so far this year without Shai on the court, Josh Giddey has a 19.9% usage rating, 16.4 total rebound percentage, 37.1 assist percentage, while averaging 1.08 fantasy points per minute. Obviously, a very short sample size, but Josh Giddey's role is pretty clear on this. And if Shai is going to be replaced by a guy like Kenrich Williams, who's not going to handle the ball and just going to be out there to be a defender and like a spot-up shooter, grab a couple boards, Josh Giddey is going to have all of the ball handling responsibilities. Again, a 37.1% assist percentage with Shai off the court. And then guys like Lou Dort, Darius Bazley are very much so in play. I think this game actually plays closer than the Vegas line indicates. The Thunder have really only been blown out twice this year, once by the Nets, which is fine, and then the other time was against the Houston Rockets, which that was the Rockets' only win of the season. So pretty crazy that they got blown out by them. But since the beginning of last year, Dort has a 25.6% usage rating with Shai off the court, while Darius Bazley has a 24.1% usage rating since the beginning of last year with Shai off the court. The Hawks also have the 4th worst defensive rating in the entire NBA, the worst half-court defense in the league. So it's a very good matchup for the Thunder as long as they can keep it competitive. If Shea ends up being healthy, I'm not really interested in anybody on this team. Move over to the Atlanta Hawks. Onyeka Okongwu and DeAndre Hunter are out. Bogdan Bogdanovic is questionable. Bogdan ended up exiting early last game, was replaced by Cam Reddish, who ended up closing and playing the last 16 minutes of the game. So if Bogdan is ruled out, I'm expecting Cam Reddish to end up starting, and he would be a very, very good play at 3,600. Kevin Huerter at 4,200. They like barely touch his price over here on Draftkings. He's going to continue to play like 32 to 34 minutes in replacement of DeAndre Hunter. Gets a good matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm expecting this game to stay closer than Vegas indicates, like I said. So I think Kevin Huerter, regardless of Bogdan playing or not, is a great play. Obviously a bump to him if he's playing or if he's out, and then Cam Reddish obviously would be a very good replacement. And then I think Clint Capella absolutely murders this Oklahoma City front court. This front court is so bad, whether it's Derek Favors Jr. or Jeremiah Robinson Earl, doesn't really matter. They've been getting absolutely abused, and Clint Capella is probably going to do the same over here. You know, they set his fantasy points a bit higher than we're used to. We're used to getting him at like 30, 31 fantasy points. Now he's at 35 fantasy points. I still lean the over here. You know, his minutes got cut back a little bit just because that game ended up going small. Don't think that happens in this case. Move over to the Indiana Pacers versus the Chicago Bulls. A 210.5 over under. The Bulls are currently 4.5 point favorites. The Pacers are going to be without TJ Warren, but that is it. Due to some really, really odd situations in the last two games, the Pacers starters have seen less minutes, and that has dropped their prices to places where they just should not be. Pretty point blank with that. 2 games ago, the Pacers, you know, the starting unit was just playing very, very bad. They were getting blown out by the Hornets, so they exited the game like 3 minutes into the third quarter, which is very early. The backups came in and they closed out the game, actually made it pretty competitive, almost led to a comeback. And then last game, they played a lot better, but the game ended up blowing out, so they didn't play past like midway through the third quarter. So they have dropped their prices pretty significantly. So guys like Domantas Sabonis, Brogdon specifically Malcolm Brogdon, $7,300 is a crazy price tag. I know Chicago is good defensively, but man, I mean, he should really be in the mid 8Ks in my opinion. I like his over here on Price Picks if I can find him. Yeah, it's at 34 fantasy points right now. I lean the over right here. And then Karis LeVert, more of a tournament option. Again, like you look at his minutes, he's played 18, 17 minutes, but he's barely played into the second half. He would play around 30 to 32 minutes in my opinion in a normal situation, which this game should be. It's only a 4.5 point spread, more of a tournament option, but Sabonis and Brogdon specifically should be a staple in your cash lineups. Move over to the Chicago Bulls. Nikola Vucevic and Patrick Williams are out, and it's the same thing as always. DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, the only two guys that I have interest in on the Chicago Bulls side. They run the offense almost completely with no Nikola Vucevic. Move over to the Orlando Magic versus the Milwaukee Bucks. A 217 over under. The Bucks are currently 12.5 point favorites. We just saw this game not too long ago. It was relatively competitive. The Magic are going to be without Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Michael Carter-Williams, and Etuan Moore. Cole Anthony and Gary Harris are questionable. The starting unit was off to a minus 15 start to begin the second half and were benched for the entirety of the game. So the game was really close, was pretty close in the first half. The second half starts. The Milwaukee Bucks go on a really strong run in the first couple minutes, and then the backup unit comes in for the Magic, and they end up closing it out. So guys like Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba just never saw the court in the fourth quarter and the second half of the third quarter. So they missed out on a ton of minutes. Assuming that doesn't happen, I like Wendell Carter Jr., 5,700. They dropped his price way too much, and if Cole Anthony were to miss again, Jalen Suggs, I'm just going to go back to the well with him, even though they raised his price from 3,800 to 5,000. He would continue to lead that team in usage and assist percentage if Cole were to miss. And then if Gary Harris ends up missing, RJ Hampton would likely start in his place. He had a very good game last time out. He was a part of that bench squad that almost led a comeback against the Milwaukee Bucks, made the game competitive. He would be very much so in play if Cole Anthony and Gary Harris were to miss. On the Milwaukee Bucks side, they are going to be without Brook Lopez, Dante DiVincenzo, and Semi Ojeleye. The game was close enough for the starters to get into the 30-minute range, But I think the days of Giannis Antetokounmpo playing like 36, 38 minutes a game in the regular season are probably over, with his team becoming much more, much healthier. He still put up a very dominant game, 74 fantasy points in 30 minutes, which is wild. I mean, nobody on this Orlando Magic team can even attempt to hold Giannis. So if you have the money to get up to Giannis, I think he's a great play. But again, I just think that he's no longer going to be playing 36, 38 minutes like he was earlier on in the season when Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton were out. So yeah, not much interest from the Bucks side outside of slight tournament interest in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Move over to the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the New Orleans Pelicans. 213.5 over under. The Timberwolves are currently 3.5 point favorites. The Timberwolves are going to be, they have Josh Okogie and Naz Reid as questionable. The Pelicans have the second worst defensive rating in the entire NBA. So a very good matchup for the Timberwolves. Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards prices have fallen just way too much, especially Karl-Anthony Towns. He is only $9,500. And if Naz Reid were to be ruled out here, I think we see the ceiling of minutes from Karl-Anthony Towns. We see these last couple, I mean, this game blew out, so he didn't see his minutes. But without Naz Reid in these games, we've seen him play 40, 37, 38 minutes as opposed to like the 31, like the low 30s minutes. I think we see upwards of 40 minutes from Karl-Anthony Towns here because they don't really feel comfortable with anybody else at the 5 outside of Karl-Anthony Towns and Naz Reid. So if Naz Reid is out, they're going to push Towns minutes as much as they possibly can, and it's a great matchup again against the New Orleans Pelicans. As of right now, Towns is probably going to be a staple in my lineups. Move to the New Orleans Pelicans. Zion Williamson is out. Devontae Graham is questionable. Tomas Satoransky has started in place of Devontae Graham in each of the last 2 games that Devontae Graham has missed, and he is still minimum price. So that just goes to show you how poorly he is of a permanent producer on this Pelicans team, because it is weird. When he was with the Bulls, he was always a pretty good play when he was the starter, but just hasn't really shown any upside so far with the Pelicans. But the Timberwolves allowed the highest offensive rebound percentage by far in the league at 32.4%. So the rebounding rates of Jonas Valanciunas should be very, very high today. And that gives me my first official play over here on Prize Picks. It is going to be the over 11.5 rebounds for Jonas Valanciunas. I think he should easily hit this. They are a bad rebounding team on both sides, but especially offensive rebounding. So a lot of opportunities is likely going to come the way of Jonas Valanciunas, and I think he should play really big minutes here. I think he's fine from a fantasy perspective, but really like the over 11.5 fantasy points here. Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, both would become very good plays if we were going to be without Devontae Graham yet again. But that offense has looked pretty sketchy without Devontae Graham. Move over to the Phoenix Suns versus the San Antonio Spurs at 219.5 over under. The Suns are currently 6-point favorites. The Suns are going to be without Dario Saric, Abdel Nader, Frank Kaminsky. I'm really only interested in DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges here. I think Mikal Bridges continues to be too cheap, and that gives me my second play. So the first play is going to be Jonas Valanciunas over 11.5 rebounds. And then my second play to complete the 2-pick is going to be the over Mikal Bridges 23 fantasy points. We hit this last time at over 22.5 fantasy points. He hit that despite the game blowing out and him missing out on minutes in a normal scenario. So the spread is currently only 6 points. In competitive games, he's playing upwards of like 36, 37 minutes. And him getting 23 fantasy points seems pretty easy. This Spurs team does like to turn the ball over a lot. So a lot of steal opportunities for a guy like Mikal Bridges, who can get those guys, or who can get steals in bunches, and you get 3 full fantasy points over here on Prize Picks. So I like the over on Mikal Bridges, 23 fantasy points. If you want to pair that with Jonas Valanciunas over 11.5 rebounds, I think that's a very good route today. And we are running hot right now. We're going for 3 in a row. If you tailed my 3 pick yesterday, you would have 5x'd your money. And again, if you guys haven't deposited yet, make sure to sign up and deposit using code Taylor, TAYLOR, for a 100% match bonus up to $100. Think we are in a really good spot. If you get these numbers in early before the lines start moving everywhere, you can get a ton of value. And remember, if injuries break, make sure to come over here and take a look at the board, because there's probably some serious value you can take advantage of. Move over to the San Antonio Spurs. Jock Landale and Zach Collins are out. Jakob Poeltl ended up returning last game. They said he was going to end up starting. He ended up coming off the bench in replacement of Drew Eubanks. He only played 15 minutes, but you got to remember, before the injury, Jakob Poeltl was playing massive minutes. Now, I don't expect that here. Even if he's starting, I'm not expecting them to bring his minutes up just quite yet, but it is worth mentioning moving forward that he could end up being in a pretty good spot. But I'm not really interested in anybody on this Spurs team. Move over to the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Utah Jazz at 222 over under. The Jazz are currently 9.5 point favorites. The Grizzlies are going to be without D'Anthony Melton and Sam Merrill. Dylan Brooks is also doubtful, so not expecting him to play. Kyle Anderson ended up starting last game without D'Anthony Melton and Dylan Brooks. The game ended up blowing out. They got absolutely slaughtered by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Not necessarily expecting that here, but they are facing the Utah Jazz at home and are 9.5 point favorites. But assuming this game stays competitive, I think Desmond Bane, Kyle Anderson are two of the best value plays on the entire slate. And, Steven Adams is $4,300 now. I'm not interested in him all that much. I think playing him against Rudy Gobert just really plays into what the Jazz want to do. So I think we see extended minutes from Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 here. The way to beat the Utah Jazz and Rudy Gobert is to draw Rudy Gobert away from the paint. So we will likely see Jaren Jackson Jr. playing a lot of the 5 today because he is such a good shooter, such a good three-point shooter. If he can draw Rudy Gobert out of the paint, it really opens up a ton for this Memphis offense. So I like Jaren Jackson Jr. quite a bit at $6,000. One of my favorite tournament options on the entire slate. And I do like the over 30.5 fantasy points over here on Jaren Jackson Jr. So if you want to pair that with the other two guys, I don't feel as confident as I do in the first 2 picks. But if you want to add a third, maybe we can hit back-to-back 3 picks and 5x our money 2 nights in a row. Move over to the Utah Jazz. They have no injuries. Memphis Grizzlies have a 113.8 defensive rating, which is by far the worst in the NBA. So a very good matchup for the Utah Jazz. But with them being healthy, and being involved in so many blowouts, their prices are priced pretty appropriately right now. I think Donovan Mitchell and Jordan Clarkson are the 2 guys I would have interest in it, just because of how massive their usages are. Donovan Mitchell so far this year at 33.4% usage rating, while Jordan Clarkson has a 29.1% usage rating. So both those guys, more of tournament options for me, but I think are in a very, very good spot, especially if this game can stay competitive. Move over to the last game of the slate. The Philadelphia 76ers versus the Sacramento Kings at 218.5 over under. The Kings are currently 2.5 point favorites. The Sixers are going to be without Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and then Danny Green is questionable. So if Danny Green plays, I'm probably not interested in anybody on this team outside of Tobias Harris. And then the Kings are a very, very poor rebounding team. I think that they're 3rd in the league in terms of offensive rebounding percentage allowed. So that bodes well for Andre Drummond, but against a smaller Sacramento Kings team, I think it's likely that the Sixers continue to play Georges Niang down the stretch of the games at the 5. That seems like what they've been wanting to do, and they've been much more efficient playing like that. So if Niang is in the starting lineup and Danny Green is out again, I think Niang is an interesting tournament option. I think he's a fine cash game option, to be honest, if he's in the starting lineup without Danny Green at $4,200. I think that's a very, very affordable price tag. And then move over to the Sacramento Kings. They have no injuries. We could see a new starter instead of Chimezie Metu here. He was promised a certain amount of starting games. The last game was the last time that he was promised to be a starter. We could continue to see that. Maybe we see Marvin Bagley back into the starting lineup. Maybe they go back to Maurice Harkless, who has been out of the rotation. Maybe he is in the starting lineup now. But I think that 5th starter at the power forward position is going to be someone different today. So make sure to watch out for that. That does start 3 hours after lock. So we're probably not going to get news on that. But I do think that De'Aaron Fox, Harrison Barnes, and Rashawn Holmes, they've been dealing with a lot of foul trouble and blowouts, which have decreased their price tags, much like the Indiana Pacers. I think that they are entirely too cheap. The Sixers have been a bottom 10 defense all year, but especially since Joel Embiid has been out. So yeah, Fox, Barnes, Holmes, I think are all fine plays, definitely in play. But again, guys, I will be live at 5 p.m. Central Time. That is the most critical thing when it comes to DFS, getting that latest breaking injury news, and I'll help break that down for you guys. as well as answering as many questions as I possibly can. But if you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Comment down below if you made it this far in the video. Curious to see how many of you guys actually watched this deep in the video, because I think we're almost 25 minutes deep. But yeah, appreciate you guys being here nonetheless. Best of luck tonight, and until next time, peace.